introduce Casey here in a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I don't know if the screen is, maybe it's just my screen that's not doing it, but hopefully it's spotlighting myself and Casey Koyczan. I want to welcome everybody. It'd be so much nicer to have you in the new space at the Abajibawan New Media Lab here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We're also excited to kind of reach out to all of you that might not be anywhere near Winnipeg, Manitoba. I had the great pleasure of meeting Casey. He was introduced by a really good friend of ours, Cheryl LaRondelle, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago at one of the Imaginative events. And I remember being so excited to get to meet him because our work actually has lots of intersection and play. And so the other exciting thing is that Casey's here in Winnipeg and is almost finished his Masters of Fine Arts at the University of Manitoba. And the workshop's going to be based a little bit around that work. I'm going to read Casey's bio. Culture, technology, and the environment are intrinsically linked with the evolution of our society. We live day to day practicing the teachings of our ancestors while at the same time coexisting with technological advances that are constantly developed every year. We have adapted to the use of these resources in order to develop a better understanding of where we come from, who we are, and what will be in the future. Casey Koyczan is, Tlicho Dene, interdisciplinary artist from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, that works in various mediums to communicate how culture and technology coincide together alongside with the political, economic, and environmental challenges in the world. A portion of his large-scale installation work utilizes earth materials to invoke the idea of nature, reclaiming architectural space. Inspired by sci-fi and the future, Koyczan implements various techniques and interactivity, audio, video, VR, 360, and XR, and the engagement of bodily senses within his creations. He's an international artist that has practiced in many or participated in many residencies, exhibitions, festivals, and collaborations in parts of the world such as Finland, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, and the Netherlands, and the UK. He is also a musician, producer, filmmaker, actor, writer, teacher, workshop facilitator, graphic designer, web designer, and advocate for future generations of artists and musicians. He has a multimedia production diploma from Lethbridge College, a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Thompson Rivers University, and just like I said, he is almost completed his Masters of Fine Arts here at the University of Manitoba. We are really pleased and excited to say Chimigwich and Marcy to the Indigenous Screen Office, who has helped contribute to some of these workshops. And we're also, I'm really grateful to Marika and all her hard work as our coordinator and research assistant here on the project. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Casey. We're super excited to get to hear and experience some sound-based work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'll just share my screen and share my computer sound. And there we go. All right. So thank you so much. This is an honor to do this workshop and to introduce you to this amazing program called Ableton Live. I switched from using Pro Tools to Ableton in around 2017, and I haven't really looked back because I just find that with the way my mind works and sound and that sort of thing, that Ableton is a really intuitive program, and it's very open-ended. Like some people think that it's primarily for DJs, but I use it for a lot of my soundscapes and designs. It's also able to link to physical materials and properties through a program called Max4 Live, which is kind of like a bridge between Ableton Live and Max MSP, which is like a visual programming language. So first things first, where to get Ableton. So this is just the Ableton Live website. You go under shop, and these are the bot versions. They have various different forms of, eligibility and that sort of thing for Ableton. These are all the live 11 suites that came out not too long ago. So for the intro track or intro license, it'll show exactly kind of what's available. I'm operating Ableton Live 10 with the standard license, which I purchased many, many years ago. And then you can get the HD suite, which is considerably more expensive. There's also trial versions of Ableton, so you can just download that for free, just if you want to try it out and test it out. Although there'll be some limitations, I believe, within the trial version, you're not able to export, but there's ways around that. Yeah, so that just gives you an idea as to where to buy Ableton. As well, I should just mention this right off the bat. The website also is filled with Ableton Live packs. So I don't even think you need to have Ableton in order to download these. Some of them are paid, a lot of them are free. So that's a place to get them as well. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be in the description of the workshop, but I also provided a link to a company called Ghost Hack. They're a company, I think they're somewhere in Europe, I think they're German, and they provide tons and tons of free samples to use for audio production, regardless of what digital audio workstation you use, whether it be Pro Tools or Ableton or Cubase, Logic, all of them. It's just a really expansive resource for all of the samples and stuff that you need. I create a lot of my own content, but I like to think as samples as a way to assist you to reach your final goal or the vision that you have in your mind for audio production. So I'll open up Ableton here. I thought it was already open, but it's going to start up. And first, what I'll do is just go over the layout of Ableton in general. And as any new piece of software, when you open it, there's going to be a while of getting a little bit overwhelmed. It's a new program, you don't know how to use it, but like any program, you just spend time with it, and eventually you'll be able to kind of navigate your way around. Tutorials on YouTube are very beneficial. A lot of the things that I've learned within Ableton has been through use of tutorials or message boards and forums and that sort of thing. So the internet is there to help you for sure. When you first open Ableton, it'll give you this layout. Move this thing here. And so it defaults to this vertical view with your mixer in here. And one thing I can suggest right off the bat is to have this information view available, so that anywhere that you mouse over within the program, it's going to give you an explanation of what it is. So that is something that has helped me a lot in learning Ableton throughout the years. In order to get that window, if it's not displayed, you just go to your view screen and click info, and then it'll pop up right there. So if you're not sure what a certain button does, you can just mouse over it, and then it'll showcase it in this little screen here. So the follow, if activated, the display will scroll during playback to keep the current song position visible, and so forth. So that's one thing to note. The other thing is it'll default to this view, the mixer view. The way that my mind kind of interprets music is through a horizontal linear sort of realm. So most of the time I'm in this view. However, if you're operating with a dual monitor setup, you can go to view and click second window, and it'll bring up the other view. So these are the two different views that Ableton has. And it's really handy to have this mixer view, say the way that I set it up. I have a TV as my main monitor or second monitor, and then the computer screen on the MacBook here. So if I'm using both screens, I'm just using one screen right now for simplicity's sake. But if I was using two screens, I'd have this mixer view on the bottom on my MacBook screen, and then the timeline, horizontal timeline view up on the TV, so that I can access both things. It enables you to kind of like check your volumes and your effects, and it just makes it easier. And that's one of the reasons why I love Ableton so much. For me personally, I just find that it makes things easier. Most people will say that, you know, you can understand a program and that sort of thing, but I like to think that Ableton understands me. I know that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but that's just the way it feels, just on how intuitive it is and what it can do and how powerful it is. So, so you'll have your browser sidebar here that's mixed, that has all of your categories of like sounds and instruments and audio effects. I usually just leave it on audio effects because I love to use effects. And for every version that they release of Ableton, this bank is just getting bigger and bigger and more powerful and resourceful. So I really appreciate them doing that. You also have a lot of sections for like Max for Live patches and plugins and different clips and samples. All of your packs that you download can go here. So it makes it really easily accessible in order to acquire the things that you like to use or that you download and that sort of thing. So starting from the top left, Link, Ableton Link. This is something that was incorporated quite a few years ago. Basically, what this does is, say you're sitting in a room with someone else. You're both on your computers and you both have Ableton powered up. If you're both on the same internet network, you can press this button and it's going to link both of your Ableton programs together with the same time tempo and that sort of thing. That's how a lot of DJs and producers, if they're doing these dual kind of music sets, that's how they'll operate, so that they could have their own kind of station producing their own sounds, and then their partner or collaborator is also able to kind of like feed off of that, or they're able to collaborate together. So it's a really powerful sort of feature within Ableton. The tap tempo, if you're trying to match the tempo of, let's say, a drum beat or something, you can click that at the tempo that you feel is adequate, and it'll change your beats per minute here. Ableton starts off with a tempo of 120 beats per minute, which is kind of standard within the music industry or life. Not a lot of people know this, but 60 beats per minute and 120 beats per minute is really integral to life. Like a clock ticks at 60 beats per minute, our heart beats at an average of 60 beats per minute, and intervals like that. So if you're creating and mixing at intervals of, let's say, 30 to 60 to 120 beats per minute, even 240 beats per minute, it seems to be kind of like naturally well received with your body and your chemical makeup. It's interesting, like some of your favorite songs might be at 60 beats per minute or some sort of interval within that. Anyways, that's just something that I picked up along the way. I think it's a fascinating sort of tidbit of information, but that might be one of the reasons why they default it to 120 beats per minute. Next, you have the nudge buttons. This is mostly used for like DJs and stuff like that when they're trying to sync up to tracks with the sounds that they're using. It'll slightly nudge the BPM left or right in order to just kind of sync up. You have your time signature bar here, 4/4 This is kind of like, you know, music theory sort of lingo, but 4/4 is like a standard kind of beat. You can adjust these to be any sort of time signature that you want, but this is the default 4/4. It's 4/4 is usually what I play in, regardless of what kind of music I'm creating and that sort of thing. This will be your metronome, so you can click this on and off to get the clicking sound. And a quick way to adjust the volume of this is go back to the vertical right here. The tap tempo, or the metronome volume, is right here. It'll be this little headphone sort of thing on the master channel here. So I'll usually just turn it down depending on how loud your input is. It can you can definitely change it and fluctuate it, but you'll notice if you can hear that it's a lot less impeding right now. You can also change what it sounds like. This is like the classic metronome sound, where the fourth or the first click is highlighted with like a higher pitch. You can just change it to a click. It kind of sounds like something's just skipping. Or the good old wood blocks, which is kind of a little easier on the ear. This sort of helps if you're making more like ambient music and it's more of a click that's embedded within your soundtrack. But I'm just going to put it back to the classic sort of click for now. And then you have your bars. This is operating at 1 bar, and it's like the duration of the sections of the timeline. So I'm just going to leave it at 1 bar for now. Some of these you can just look it up in the information toolbar here, but you have your follow. I'm just going to kind of like breeze over some of these because they're not quite integral to this workshop. This workshop is formed more as like an introductory sort of thing to Ableton, and I only have so much time. So can I kind of go through some of these pretty quick. You have your arrangement position, which basically like right now it's on 38, so it aligns with the 38 here. It's just kind of how things come in, and you have your different locations. This bar is like in the way of my screen. There we go. And you have your play button, your stop button, and your record button. The way Ableton works is the space bar on your keyboard will do the start and the stop. Click once and click again to stop. And then also the record button will play the playhead there. So if you have a track that's triggered, then it'll start recording and play as soon as you hit the record button. So it's kind of handy. You have your MIDI arrangement, your automation arm. This is going to record and track any manual changes you make within your recording process. Say if you're recording and you're changing like delay values as it's recording or as it's playing back, it's going to record that automation, which is a really handy tool. You have your re-enable automation, you know, if you turn it off or back to default, capture MIDI button, session record button. You have your loop start and punch in point. This is your loop and punch in point. I'll get to this momentarily. You have your punch in switch, the loop switch, the punch out switch, and then the loop punch region lengths. This is your draw mode switch so that you could draw in some of your MIDI notes and that sort of thing. I'll explain MIDI in a little bit here. And then your computer MIDI keyboard. This is one of the coolest things about Ableton. Within my practice and the workshops that I create, I like to make them really inclusive and accessible, right? So even though, you know, licenses of Ableton can be expensive, even within the trial version that you can get for free, this may be available. What this button does is it enables you to use your keyboard, your computer's keyboard, as a music keyboard. So you don't necessarily need a MIDI trigger or a MIDI controller in order to create content within Ableton. For this workshop, and usually my go-to when I'm creating, I use an Akai MPK Mini MIDI controller. It's like a small controller. It's kind of one of the standards, but it's very cheap. I bought it for like $35 off of a friend like many years ago, and since then it's traveled with me to Finland, Colombia, and the Netherlands, doing residencies over there, as well as across Canada. It's a nice, durable little piece of technology, and I really enjoy it. Ableton is very, it's very smart in like picking up which controller you're plugging in as well. So I definitely recommend picking up a cheap MIDI controller if you're serious about getting into Ableton, but you don't necessarily need one because you have this computer keyboard button here to use. You have your key tap mode switch. These are little indicators that will let you know if Ableton is sending and receiving MIDI information. You're also able to map your MIDI triggers in order to do different things within Ableton. It's a really powerful feature. I won't be getting to that today, but just letting you know it's there. It'll also let you know how much your CPU is being used by the software and other allocated sort of things. And it'll let you know if your hard drive is going to be overloaded. So that's the top bar. I'll get to a bit of the timeline stuff here, and then we'll start importing some clips. Actually, let's import a clip right now. So I've provided a folder that I've created of a bunch of different WAV files, and these files are they are dry exports from my soundtrack, my MFA exhibit soundtrack. So my MFA exhibit was up at Urban Shaman just recently, and what I did was created this multi-channel audio soundscape for these logs that are hanging within the space. They're hollowed out, and there's 5 different speakers. There's a speaker in each one of the logs that are playing a soundtrack, and they're each their own sort of soundtrack, but they all work together. So I'll actually open that right now real quick and give you guys an idea as to how it sounds and what it looks like, just so that you can kind of like wrap your head around how Ableton looks when it's like filled with information. So this is the soundscape in its entirety. Basically, this is with all of the channels on. These are your track activator buttons. So when these are highlighted in yellow, that means that they're activated. When you click it and it turns gray, that means it's basically turned off. You also have your solo button. So if everything's playing and then you just click that button, it'll only play this one track. It's kind of standard with a lot of different digital audio workstations and that sort of thing. And then this is your arm button, which basically gets you ready for recording. If you have this on and you press record, then whatever you press on your computer keyboard or your MIDI trigger, it'll correspond to that. This is a Midi track, so it'll be corresponding to Midi. But if you have a microphone plugged in, or you're using your computer's microphone, which is another thing I'll get to momentarily, it'll get ready to record audio, as well as, yeah, if you have a line plugged in, like let's say a guitar or a bass or some sort of synth with like a patch cord in your interface, it'll also get you ready to record that as well. So yeah, with this soundtrack, so I have 5 tracks of my Dene drum that I was recording in here, as well as a few different vocal, like chanting sort of tracks, a guitar track and a bass track, and some synth tracks and MIDI tracks that kind of bring it all together. So just to give you an idea as to what it sounds like, I'll just play it here. No sound coming through. Okay. Okay. Thanks for the heads up. I'm just going to check this here. Okay, so we'll one thing that you want to definitely check with Ableton is your audio preferences and just your preferences in general, and it gives you an idea as to where your audio is inputting from, what the output is, and that sort of thing. Zoom audio device, would that be it, I guess? Output. Let's see if this works. There you go. You guys are hearing that now? Excellent. Hey, Marek and Jessica, thank you for joining. I just noticed that you're here. Hello. Okay, and so you all can hear me as well as the audio right now. I just want to make sure that that's happening. So
the track can come down a little bit.
Okay, okay. So how's that?
A little more. Good.
There? Okay, perfect. We're learning. We're all learning together here.
Casey, do you mind? Sorry, it's just Julie. Somebody is saying in the chat that the sound's a little bit hard to hear, and I'm wondering, when you did your share your screen, did you share your sound as well?
I did. I just went through and fixed all of that.
Okay, so maybe just try, we can turn it up a little bit. I don't know if that will help, but it was just somebody's comment in the chat, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Oh, it's saying the audio's a little loud to hear you. Oh, okay, sorry, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I'm in the chat reading all this and corresponding to it, so I think we're in a good place now.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool.
Right on. Moving on. Okay, so the way I engineered this is it's a 15-second loop that goes through all of these channels. And what I did to create my soundtrack was that I paired up some of these sounds together to create like a 2 to 3 audio layer for each of the 5 logs and each of those channels. So for instance, this this Midi synth here, it's called Mouth of the Whale Choir. I absolutely love this sound. I think it's kind of like, it's a little haunting, but like it's also euphoric. And I paired it up with the center log, the biggest log that has a very basic Dene drum sound and beat to it. But it sounds something like this. So the way that this is working in real life within the installation is, as you walk up to the log, there's laser sensors that kind of read your proximity, and it'll start to play back this soundscape for that log specifically. And the proximity is based on like a volume sort of switch, so that the closer you get to the log, the louder it will be, and that sort of thing. So with this being a MIDI track, if you double click on this, it'll show you exactly what's being played, the note that is being played as well. And if you remember the draw button, if that's activated, then you can just go in and like literally draw in other MIDI notes. This is going to take a bit of it's going to play some other sounds in there, which I don't really want. But just letting you know how MIDI works. To be completely honest, I was not a fan of MIDI when I started playing music. I was like, oh, it's just fake, you know, it's not even a real instrument, blah, 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 kind of pretentious. But I really noticed how useful it was, because with Midi, you have these notes being played in the areas that they are, and what Ableton can do is you could just go into your instruments rack and change this to a different instrument, but it's going to keep this Midi information the same. So you could just try out numerous different instruments and sounds, and it just makes things really easy, as well as being able to change the length of your clips and Midi notes as well is super handy. So that's what I did for the first vlog, and then you know, for some of the other sounds, I paired them up with different things. I'm not sure if this is even going to be correct, but exactly how I did it. But so I'll take a Midi kind of track, a drum track, and let's go with like the vocal bass sort of synth here. So this would be an example of another log that's triggering different audio and that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea as to how that works as well. So I got a question coming in. Can we download library 10 if we have only library 11? I believe you can, Patricia. Ableton seems to be pretty good in terms of like cross compatibility and that sort of thing. And regardless of what your library is, I think it should work, depending, or you know, regardless of what version you're using. But I'm not the expert on Ableton, so definitely check some message boards and that sort of thing. Okay. One of the best things about Ableton that I found was extremely useful for me is how the timeline works, like especially the horizontal timeline like this. So if you'll see on screen, you have a bunch of these vertical lines, and these correspond to your tempo, to your beats per minute here. So 120 beats per minute. And you can zoom in to this this timeline. I like to call it an elastic timeline. I'm not even sure if that's the real way to say it, but I call it an elastic timeline because, so keep your eye on these lines here. And what's going to happen is when I zoom in, it's going to start to create more vertical lines at like the 50% mark, like halfway through these lines, which means that it's always going to make sure that you're corresponding to your tempo. No matter how like far you zoom in to your clips, it's always going to want to make it 120 beats per minute. And I think that's extremely useful. And it really helps if you're, you know, making electronic music or something with like really quick sounds, that you could put them in, and they're going to kind of like snap to these lines as well. So I think it's an amazing sort of feature within Ableton itself. So yeah, I'll start to cover some more ground. So that's just an overview of kind of how I constructed the soundscape of my installation as well. But I'm just going to start a new set so that we can start loading in some clips and give you an idea as to how Ableton's working. So I'm just going to go back to my horizontal timeline. This is a brand new timeline. It automatically gives you 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks. For the most part, we're going to be just using the audio tracks here, but I'll also show you how to work these MIDI tracks as well. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I provided some of these samples that I created from my installation, and what they are, they're dry samples. So in musical terms, a dry sample or a dry sound is with no effects or anything placed onto the sound. A wet effect, so dry and wet, a wet effect is something that's like, it's you know, drenched in effects. Like say if effects corresponds to water and you're pouring water onto a sound, that makes it wet. So that's just like some audio lingo there. So all of these are dry sounds. And so what I'll do is I'll put in all of the Dene drum sounds to begin with. And just if you saw that, you could just click and drag them into your timeline. Make sure it's on the audio, an audio track if it's an audio clip. And you just click and release. If it's a longer clip, sometimes it'll take a little bit to load, but just be patient. It definitely will load. So I'm just going to load in a couple of these Dene drum tracks, and they're all exported at these 15-second intervals. So they all line up perfectly like that. So I'll throw in a couple to create. So I want to bring in another track here, but there's not enough audio tracks. I believe you might be able just to drag it into an empty space here, and it'll automatically generate an audio track or channel for you. But if you just want to make a bunch of audio tracks, there's a couple different ways to do that. One is I'm on a Mac right now, and I basically just hold Command and T for track, and it'll create an audio track. If you want to create a new Midi track, then you hold down Shift, Command T, and it'll create a new Midi track for you there. The manual way to do it is to go into Create up at the top bar here, and you can go Insert Audio Track or Insert Midi Track. But shortcuts are definitely valuable with Ableton, so just familiarize yourself with those and you'll be all right. So I'll also add in some of these atmospheric sounds. Atmosphere 1, atmosphere 2. And then I have my vocal sort of chanting and stuff here. Bass and chanting. Oh. Okay, so those are all in there. And if we play this, we don't have any sort of effects on this or whatever, and there's no mastering done so far, so it's gonna sound quite different from what you previously heard within the installation. What I'm gonna do before I even play this is I'm gonna drag make sure my info window is open. So I'm just gonna drag the launch and start point to the very end like that, and then drag this to the end of the clip. That way it's highlighting all of the clips, and then you just right click on it and go loop. So that means that when the playhead gets to the end of this clip, it's automatically going to jump back to the start. So you'll have a healthy loop, and it's really good to test different things and making sure that all of your clips are looping properly or just playing properly, really. So I go to the start here and play. Okay, so it's looping, and there's absolutely no effects on any of these. So for instance, you're able to hear my chanting quite easily, and I don't really like the sound of my own voice, so when I'm mixing, I make sure to put on a lot of delay and reverb and that sort of thing to kind of just like blend it all together. So this is an example of how you can kind of like stack some of your audio clips, your wave clips, and that sort of thing. So let's add some effects right now, because this is one of the best things about Ableton, to me anyway. I love effects within music, but I love how easily Ableton enables you to make effects and implement effects onto your clips. So that you have an idea as to how it sounds, I'm just going to use this main clip, the audio clip that's used within the biggest log within my installation, and I'm going to click the solo button just so that we're hearing this one track. So if I press play, it's going to just play that beat. And so I think that this could be kind of punched up a little bit. I can make it a little bit more just tastier sounding. So one of the first things for your audio clips is to provide this like to an EQ, to EQ it, and it's like this volumetric sort of way of making your clip sound better and a little bit easier on the ear and that sort of thing. So what I like to use, I go into the audio effect rack here, and you bring down the little drop down thing. We're kind of jumping the gun with mixing and mastering, but this is something that I use just to kind of punch up the audio quality of my clips. Because there's so much in Ableton, the more you use it, you'll find that there's a few different effects that you just naturally kind of go back to and use. And I like to think that it sort of helps you form your style of your sound and that sort of thing. So for me, it's gotten to a point that like I only use a couple different like mixing and mastering effects, and there's only like one or two delays that I use or reverbs and that sort of thing. And I know that I'm kind of holding myself back in terms of like experimentation, but you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Like that's one of the main sort of lessons. So these are just a few different things that I use. So I like this EQ and compressor master effect. So to use this, you just click this, and if you have this track clicked, you can either drop it right into here, but sometimes you'll like, when you click on it and go over here to click something, you can accidentally click something else. So just to be safe, I just drag it into this area here, and then it automatically throws it into your effects bank, which is this area here. So this is our EQ and compressor master. With the Dene drum, it's mostly the mid range that affects its sound. I know a lot of drums are different, but for the Dene drum specifically, it seems like the mids are usually where the sweet spot is with it. So even without pressing anything, let's just see how this sounds. And to disable this effect, you just click this button in the top left here. So let's see how it sounds with it. Take it off. So some of that like punchiness is gone. The volume is kind of dipped down a little bit, that sort of thing. When you turn it back on, it makes it a little bit more present. And as I mentioned before, like, you know, you have your own kind of style with how you use certain things and effects. And for me, with this effect, I always set it up the same way. I'll turn the rack volume to basically 0. The rack dry wet, I'll make it just at 100, so I'm not going overboard. Output gain, I'm just going to put it to 0 so that I'm not having any, you know, overhead with my effect and that sort of thing. And then you have all your different frequencies in here as well. One thing I would like to share, it's kind of good practice within audio mixing and stuff as well. Yes, Jessica, you'll, this recording is recorded. The workshop is recorded, so it'll be available. I know that I'm kind of like ripping through a lot of stuff, but I'm kind of keeping that in mind that this will be recorded, so people can go back and press pause whenever they like. So a good common practice within like audio engineering or mixing and mastering, or even just audio production, when you're using a lot of different channels, is to, I'm just going to go back into the vertical sort of section here and extend the mixer sort of bars so that you can see more information. And this is the track volume of each track. And right now it's set at 0. So if I play the sound, you'll see that all of them are relatively high. They're getting up there. This is an indicator to let you know how above or below the 0 point you are. So right now this Dene drum is actually maxing out a little bit, and you can see it here. It comes in at red. So a good practice for a lot of people, they have their own sort of like preference for what to do here. What I do usually right off the bat is I'll bring these down to -10, all of my channels, so that I'm making sure that none of them are going to be maxing out. Initially, this is going to make your mix significantly quieter, but making sure that you aren't maxing out is really important, because once you start maxing out your volume, that's when you start to produce like crackling and grain and that sort of thing, and your mix just, it won't sound good. That being said, I am using sounds from a Dene drum, and it's one of the only indigenous drums that have like 2 pieces of hide or sinew stretching across the front of the drum, so that when you play it, it kind of sounds like this rattling, crackling sound. So with a lot of the Dene drum, I've kind of like pre-EQ'd it to take out that sort of sound. So that's just a thing that Dene audio producers have to deal with on a daily basis. I know some drums just sound like absolutely beautiful and that sort of thing right from the get-go, but this is something that the Tlicho Dene have to deal with. Okay, that being said, moving on. Another good practice is with your master channel here, because all of these channels are being fed into the master channel. This is where the sound that you're hearing is coming from this channel here. The master channel, that's what it does. And one good thing to do is to bring this down as well. You could either bring it down to -10 like the rest of them, but I'm just going to do -5 for now, just to make sure that, you know, nothing's really maxing out. This is quiet right now, I know that. But what I'm also going to do is put in this EQ compressor sort of effect on the master channel as well, so that it'll apply this to all of the tracks. I know that some people may think it's redundant to kind of put an EQ and compressor on single tracks and then on the master track as well, but I find it's just kind of an easy way to sort of like get the sound that I'm looking for each individual track, and then the master track kind of treats everything with that to kind of like bump up the sound a little bit. So with this just placed in there, you'll notice everything is a little bit louder. But you can also adjust that as well. So the rack volume itself, when you bring that up, it's going to increase as well. So that's sort of how that works in regards to the tracks and the master track. Okay, let's have some fun with some effects. So that's a basic kind of like EQ sort of setup. But one of my absolute favorites is the delay. So you have your delay here. They have a bunch of different delays in here. I'm just going to go to clean, and groove is my absolute favorite delay. So same sort of thing. I'm going to drag it in here and put it there, and then it kind of like creates that chain effect with your effects here as well. So you have your EQ, which is your initial sort of like manipulation of the audio, and then the groove delay comes after that. So if I play that, let's just hear how it sounds. So the way this delay works is that it's doing this left and right sort of sync. It's creating this pan effect. It has the feedback at 69% right now and the dry wet at 90%. Your feedback is kind of like how many times it's going to repeat before the sound decays and dies off. So upwards of like 70%, that's getting kind of high. If you put it at 100%, I'll just show you what it sounds like. They won't actually do 100%, they do 95%, which is funny, but it'll kind of make it sound like it's going infinite. Like they'll keep on reproducing. So I very rarely have it higher than 75 or 80%. For this, I'll just put both of the feedback and the dry and wet at 50%, so that what the dry and wet is doing at 50% is that it's letting you hear 50% of the effect, but also 50% of the original sound file, the wave file, and how it's supposed to sound. These syncs are also put on odd numbers, which is pretty cool, but my standard practice is to put them at like 2 and 4. So that way it kind of like corresponds to your 4/4 time signature a little bit better. So let's see how this sounds now. So it has a very like rhythmic sort of quality to it. And I think that's all right. It's kind of like how I have it set up in my within my installation as well. So let's try some other effects here. Let's go to the second Dene drum. So it's like sort of double time, a little bit slower tempo as well. This Dene drum down here is like legit double time. So it's a little faster. The way that I created my installation was to have numerous different tempos of drums to make it sound like, you know, the person is within a drum circle or like at a ceremony or something like that. Oh, Dene drum, Patricia. That's how it's spelled there. It's like the drum that the Dene use, which is most notably like recognized as like a drum that has like the two strips of hide or sinew stretched across them to increase the resonance, because in our culture we believe that because we're made up mostly of water, that any way that we can increase resonance and vibration within our songs will allow us to kind of communicate with our ancestors and elders a little bit more, and so that our songs can be heard by them a little bit better. So that's just one of our belief systems within our culture. Okay. So also another really cool thing about Ableton, I should just stop saying that and just do it, but Ableton's awesome, man. I really love it. One thing that they make it easy to do is to copy and paste effects. So if I really like how this original drum is being EQ'd, I could just click this effect and then go Command C, or you can right click and go copy. Then go into your next track here. As soon as I click on it, you'll see that there's no effects here. On the first one, we have 2 effects. On this, we have none. So you just click here and then paste, and it'll paste that effect right in there. You know, if you like that delay as well, you can do the same sort of thing. Copy, paste, boom, good to go. And then you could adjust this one a little bit so that it has like a slightly different sound. For instance, I'll change this delay to like 1 and 6, and then play both of these together. And one way just to hear 2 tracks, rather than like turning off all of the track activators from the different tracks, you just click the solo button on one of the tracks and then hold down your command button and click solo on the next track, so that it's only playing these 2. that's kind of trippy. But the delay of this one is a little, having it set on the 1 there will make a really like quick repeat. I'm just gonna go 2, 6. Okay. And I'm actively checking the chat here, so just to let you guys know. How do you do timing and consistencies with your tracks? Sometimes I have issues with the synchronization between 2 tracks, especially while sampling. Okay. Yeah, this is something that I was gonna cover within what Ableton calls warping, but because the question came up now, I'll get to that right now and discuss this. Okay, so let's see if I duplicate this and turn off warping. Okay, I was just trying something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the raw file that all of these Dene drums were taken from in order to sync them up here. So with a new, I'm going to create a new audio channel, and I'm just going to like drag and drop that that file in there. So soundscape, Dene drum. So I recorded this this drum at 60 beats per minute, and drag that in there. So this is what the wave file looks like when I originally recorded it. And to give you an idea as to what it sounds like. And when you import a clip into Ableton, it's automatically going to want to warp it. You can change this in your settings so that it won't automatically warp your clips. So what warping is, it's basically trying to suit or match up the clip with the time signature that you have. So it's trying to force this clip to be 120 beats per minute. However, because I recorded this audio, like I was drumming with my Dene drum to a click that was at 60 beats per minute, it should be in time. So I'm going to take off this warp. And you'll notice that by doing that, it kind of like, it syncs up fairly well with all of these points. So I'm actually going to go back and let you hear what it sounds like without, or with the warp on, with the click. And you'll notice that it won't be in time. See, it's like missing the click, right? So it just like straight up sounds like I don't know what I'm doing. But because it was already previously recorded to a click, I'm going to take off the warp, and you'll notice that everything is a lot more in sync. So if you were recording something to a click, you might not need to warp it. So there we go. So with the question that came in, this is something that's really, that Ableton like shines with, man. Like, this feature is unbelievable. Okay, so I'm going to use this little chunk here. So I'm just going to kind of highlight it like that, press Command C to copy, and then I'm going to paste it earlier in the timeline here, like right at the start. Okay, so when you're zooming in, you can kind of see where, like what it's looking like You'll notice that because Dene drum, it's usually done a lot of double beat sort of patterns. You'll notice that the second sort of beat is a little bit off of that mark. So right now we don't have warp enabled, and that's the raw sound that we're using. So I'm just going to solo this track, and we can take a look at it. Okay, I'm also going to move my loop playhead to the end of that track so that it's only going to loop to the end of this and then go back, just so that I can make sure that it's sounding good and that it's a healthy loop, basically. So this was something that was taught to me by a friend when I was first getting into Ableton, and it was like, wow, okay, this is one of the best features of this program. It took the sound engineers a long time to figure this out, but it's an amazing tool. So you click on your sound, double click on it even, so that it shows up in this bar here and that you have this information available, and then just click warp. And what it's going to do is set up these like suggested sort of points where the impedance and the velocity of your sound wave is kind of like more noticeable. So like when this sound, it's like, this is where I'm hitting the drum, the first beat, and then the second beat, the double beat. And it kind of like, it recognizes that, which is just, that's just so cool. And make sure that I'm on the right sort of area here that's highlighted. Sometimes it jumps all over the place, but so this corresponds to this right now. This is the piece that I like cut out of the bigger piece. And when you do that and you press warp, it'll automatically set this initial point up, because this is the beginning of this clip. And what you want to do is right click this little yellow square here and click on this set 111 here. So what this does is it kind of makes this clip, this is like the starting point. It's letting the program know that this is the starting point of this clip that you're using, this little chunk that you removed from the bigger piece. And so then when you move any of these points, this isn't going to move. It's going to stay exactly where it is. And that's what you want, because you want to make all of these kind of match up with this line here. Right now, it's a little bit off. You can see that. So what we're going to do is, take this, because this is the most important sort of sound to me. The first beat is important and it will be synced up, but I want to make sure the second one is. So you just click that and you just drag it over a little bit. Sometimes it'll turn it yellow, but like this, it won't. So when you do that, you just double click it and then it'll set it as like, that's not going to go anywhere right now. And we might as well do this for the first beat too. So because I created this square and that marker, it automatically created this marker too. So that if I click off of it, it does that. And with moving those sort of markers, it also offset these as well, So one way to kind of like reduce the amount of markers that you need to place in here is, say for the last double beat here, because this isn't actually going to be audible within the clip, I'm going to drag this and move it there so that the first, this is going to get kind of confusing, the first beat from the drum is going to play at the very end, but the way that the pattern of the drum starts is with the second beat, like da-dum, da-dum. Like that second beat is like, it's kind of the main beat, right? Whereas the first beat is like this preemptive sort of sound. So the way that I mix the Dene drum is on the second beat, but the first beat needs to be in there. So the first beat is going to play. And then the second beat is going to be the highlighted beat at the beginning there. So same sort of thing. You've set up these ones here, but we're going to adjust these as well and make sure that they're in line. So when I play this back now, it should be a healthy loop, I might need to adjust the second beat at the beginning here, but let's just see how it sounds. Not bad. I think it's actually pretty good. And I think the first beat it might be a little bit too slow. I'm just gonna see how this sounds. I don't think I've ever like made it this close before. Interesting. That's a lot faster than I normally play, but that's one of the things I enjoy about Ableton is it allows you to really experiment and manipulate your sounds, your recorded sounds, or even sounds from samples and stuff like that. So I just find it, pretty fascinating. So with the question that came in, that's kind of a way that you can make sure that all of your clips are being synced, and to kind of like get rid of some of those inconsistencies. I found that kind of like manipulating clips in Ableton for me was so much easier than Pro Tools. And I'm definitely not talking negatively about Pro Tools, because it's like, it is the professional like industry standard, but there's so many different digital audio workstations now that I think there's so many that there's numerous ones that you could use for different things. And they also just like, they're different for people's styles, like I feel that my style of creation and artistic expression or musical expression is better suited with Ableton now. And I got quite a bit of feedback from people in regards to the music and compositions that I was creating before in Pro Tools to the stuff that I've been creating since like 2017, 2018, when I started using Ableton. A bunch of people just said like, it just sounds more like structured or more in time, because I was experiencing a lot of those like inconsistencies with my sound previously. But Ableton kind of like does a really good job at correcting all those things. So what I did was I did that technique with all of these clips previously, and then I kind of grouped them all together. So to give you an idea as to how to do that, this is the clip that we just made, that like really quick first beat and the accompanying second beat. I'm going to duplicate that. So you can press Command D. I think you can also just like right click and press duplicate as well. You could do that. Another thing too is like, once you have one duplicated, select this. So you have both of these clips, and then press Command D again, and it'll totally fill that. So I'm just going to move this over there because we don't need it. So now all of this should like sound pretty good as a loop. So yeah, that sounds pretty smooth. And another thing that Ableton does is that it automatically puts in your fades. So if there's like a slight inconsistency or something with your clip at either the beginning points or the end points, it'll automatically kind of smooth that out, which is also another like really cool feature about Ableton. So right now it's doing this like crossfade between each of the different clips, but they're still their own individual clip. So one way to get it to look like something like this, where it's all just one waveform, is you select the first clip and the last clip, and then you right click and you press this consolidate button. And basically what it's going to do is going to bring all of the clips together. So now it's like this unified wave file. Everything is in time. It's all synced together. Like I could even play this and it'll sync up with the rest of the sounds that I have within the soundtrack. So let's just hear what that sounds like. Cool. Okay. So I hope that answers the question that came in. And like I mentioned before, everyone has their own sort of style and how they go about things. That's just one way that I do it. That was very helpful. Thank you. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Okay, so now let's experiment with some effects on my chanting voice here. So I have 2 vocal tracks. I just had a question coming in that I'm just reading. So the question that came in is, they've noticed the reverb and delay channel by the master, these 2 channels here. These default return channels, usually what I do is send an aux input, the return delay out there instead of dropping the reverb delay effect on the channel itself. Just wondering if this is possible in Ableton. Okay. So to be completely honest, I never really got into like the returns for mixing boards and that sort of thing. But what they're doing here is they're kind of like setting up this like send and receive, this like in and out reverb and delay that you can kind of implement into like, you know, your master. However, because I usually have all of my reverbs and delays specifically set to each individual track, that I'll just, as soon as I open up something, I'll just delete these channels because I don't need them. So to be completely honest with the question, I don't really know too much about that because I don't really use them. So to people that do are into the send and receive and the ins and outs for the reverbs and delays, that's where they are, and you can definitely use them to your heart's content. But for me, that's what I do. Just to kind of like make everything easier. I know it's like some audio engineers would just be like, come on, man. It's like, well, that's just how I work. I am my own person. So let's start to implement some effects into the chanting here. And this is kind of like a lesson in how to sort of smooth out some sounds, right? And how to really like experiment with your voice, you know? And this actually might be a good time to show how someone can use their laptop's microphone. When I started, I mentioned that I like to make things as accessible as possible. So I'd like to kind of show you how you can make a production just with your laptop, just the laptop itself, with no external hardware or equipment or anything. So I'm just going to create a new track, Command T. It's the audio track here. And right now there's no sound that's coming in. So I'm going to go to my preferences, go to live preferences, and then audio. So it'll say audio input device. And usually I think by default, it'll say no device. Or it might say your built-in microphone. So just make sure your built-in microphone is selected. This latency is something that usually when you change your input device and your output device, this latency is gonna change. And these 2 numbers here, you need to pay attention to because this is your driver error compensation. And this is the overall latency that's happening. So right now it's providing a latency of 38.3 milliseconds. So you just click on this and drag it down until that overall latency count basically just says 0 or something in the negative. As soon as you get a negative value, so 0.67 milliseconds. So it's, what this is doing is it's not going to give us latency anymore, which is what we want. And this is especially noticeable if you are, say, recording a guitar, like a faster playing guitar or guitar in general. If you have latency, you will be able to hear it, and it's kind of distracting. So whenever you have a new instrument or you're adjusting your input devices and stuff, then definitely check your driver compensation and your overall latency. So right now I have the built-in microphone set as my audio input device. So I'm just going to close my preferences. And on this audio track, which is what I want to record my voice through, I'm going to click the record button. And I think it's actually taking in my microphone. So I need to adjust that because I'm wearing earbud headphones right now. Built-in input. I think this might do it. Check, 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 check. Oh, geez. Wait, check, check. No. Okay. Like I did set this up before the Zoom call, but then I plugged in my headphones and stuff, and it's kind of skewing it out of control. But what should be happening here is that it'll use your laptop's microphone. Whoa, whoa.
I was gonna warn you. I was gonna warn you.
Awesome. Okay, we got it working. But it is maxing out. So I'm going to drop this to -5, maybe even -10, actually. And okay. Check. What was that, Evan?
Maybe stop sharing your audio for a second. If you just want to show the meters, just because you'll create like a feedback loop.
Yeah, I noticed that right away. Yeah. Okay. Maybe just to keep this all together, I'll keep it on, but I'll just be very aware as to.
Yeah, just be careful.
Yeah, totally. Mixing something while on a Zoom call and sharing audio. This is kind of complex. All right, so to record your voice. So when you have those preferences set up, as soon as you'll know it's working because you'll see this meter bar in here as well. So this is like the channel that it wants to take in. It's your microphone. So if I want to record something along to my main composition, you could just record it here now. So if you arm that, check. Okay. This might get a little bit messy, but that's what's gonna happen. And then you press the record button. Okay. Disarm that. So the way that I started that was I pressed the record button, and then to stop it, right before it went back to the loop, I pressed the space bar so that it stopped the clip like right before the end, just so that you don't have like an overlapping sort of thing that you need to fix later. Also, just when you get used to Ableton, that's sort of what happens. So let's listen to what I just recorded from the laptop's microphone. And that is quite low, but you can actually hear some of the other sounds within this recording, and that's what's called bleed. And you want to try and avoid that. Some musicians and composers kind of like welcome that, but if you want to have your sounds be like specific to their own sound without any other sounds impeding on that, then just make sure that your volumes are at a sort of level that you're not going to be able to hear any sort of other tracks within this. But so that's what this sounds like. And one way to just boost up the album really, or the volume within the clip right away, is to double click it. So you have this information bar here, which is where the loop is housed and that sort of thing. But a really quick way to increase specifically just the clip sound rather than the channel sound here that you'll remember we set to -10 is to go to this slider here, and it's just this decibel value. So when you increase or decrease this, you'll physically, or like you'll be able to see this waveform get bigger and lower. So if I slide this up, it'll get bigger. That's like, and that's too much there. Then when you go to the -0 value, then it'll get significantly lower and that sort of thing. So I was at 0. Let's boost this up to +5 decibels. So you can slide it like that. But what Ableton also does is that it enables you just to click on the number and then put something in. So if I went +10, it's going to make it like that. If I just go 5, it'll set it to 5. Really quick, really easy and simple. So now, you'll be able to hear it a little bit more. And just for the sake of showing you guys some stuff, I'm going to put that up to +10. Okay. And one of my favorite things about Ableton is this this knob here. It's the Transpose knob. Basically what this is like your octave knob, to go like octave down or octave up. And they make it so easy to do this in Ableton. So I'm just going to set this loop so that it's just doing this clip specifically, and I'll mess with this transpose knob while it's playing. If I bring it up, maybe some like chipmunk kind of stuff, and that's only at +12 octaves. So let's bring it back to 0 for comparison. And I'm just going to focus on just this sort of. So on the other end of things, you could bring it down. You can get like really dark and metal. So if you go like -10 decibels. Yeah, so that's just like a one of the tips and tricks of producing in Ableton. They make octave, the octave feature really simple within Ableton, and I'm so glad that that's there, just because it makes it easy. But I'm just going to delete that for now, and let's add some effects to this chanting track. Sounds like that. So I want to smooth this out. So one of the first things that I do is I'll do my EQ. So again, going back to the audio effect rack, EQ and compressor, I'll drag that on there. Set these values to kind of like how I see fit. And then mostly what I'm going to focus on here is the bass and the mids and the highs. Okay. But where it'll really start to come together is when I implement the delays and the reverbs. So groove, just drag that onto there. Before I even play it back, I'm going to set to my kind of preference, which is like the 2 and the 4. The feedback, I'm going to bring to 50%, and the dry wet knob, I'm going to bring to 50% as well. And let's hear how it sounds now. Okay, so let's kind of let's mess with these a little bit, the feedback and the dry wet. So as I mentioned before, the dry and wet is going to allow like some of the original sound to come through, but let's hear what it sounds like when it's like maxed at 100%. So you notice that it's all of the effect is taking over. Like none of the original sound is audible. It's all as if the sound was being channeled through a delay pedal, and the output is what the delay pedal is providing. But in this case, let's just put it back to 50 because I'd like for some of that original sound to be in there. And let's increase the feedback to, let's say 85. So we'll make it really wet. So you notice right there, like how long it takes to die down. That is the byproduct of having your feedback set up really high. So I'm just going to put that to 50 for now. So it's like blending in to each other a lot more right now with the delay. And then another thing to use is your reverb. So they have a bunch of different reverbs in here now. It's like every year they just have more and more that kind of comes up. And what reverb is like it basically mimics the sounds of various different rooms and that sort of thing. So you have all these different things. We're going to use concert hall for this one, just to give it like a bigger kind of a feel. And right now, automatically, the dry wet knob is set to 100%. So let's just see how it sounds here. That's a pretty big sound. Let's bring this dry wet down to 50. Does that sounds all right? Okay. Yeah, so we covered quite a few things, but the time restraints are kind of upon us right now. So we're going to have to wrap up fairly quickly. One thing that I didn't quite cover is the video monitor, in case you want to be editing to video and stuff. So I'm just gonna show that really quick here, just so people have an idea. And it's the same as dragging and dropping your previous clips in. So this clip on my desktop is all the clips from my installation. And because it's an MP4, it recognizes it as a video clip. As soon as you drag that in, it's going to provide the video monitor for you. So that's kind of just like how that operates. It'll correspond to the playhead, like where the video is at and that sort of thing. So it makes it a lot easier to edit to video as well. So this gives you an idea as to like what the video will look like with the audio and so that's the video window there. And then when you're ready to export, there's various different ways to export, but usually it just exports whatever the loop time frame is giving you. And just go File, Export Audio, or Export Video as well. And it gives you some options here. If you're using a lot of effects, I'd recommend clicking this Render as Loop on, especially if it's a looping sort of soundtrack, which means that it'll take the remnants of the end of the clip and all the effects that trail out with that, and it'll place it at the beginning of the clip, which is super useful. It creates that really like smooth, consistent loop. You can also convert your export from stereo to mono. You can normalize it. This is where you can add some of your metadata in. You can also export an MP3 file alongside the WAV file that you're creating. So when you export, it'll export 2 files. And then also the ability to export to SoundCloud, that sort of thing. So yeah, I hope you all learned a lot within this this workshop. It goes off tempo. Let's talk, Merrick. I'll try and solve that problem with you privately if you want. But I think we need to wrap up now. Cool. So I'll just stop sharing my screen, I guess. Yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Casey. That was awesome. I know that like I'm just like sitting there just listening to all the sounds, and I was giggling when it was reverbing and then playing with your voice a bit too, which is also a lot of fun. So Chimagwich, Marcy, thank you so much for your time and energy, and I hope everybody enjoyed the workshop, and we'll have it up in a little bit on the website. I posted that. I saw that there was somebody who asked, so yeah, if anybody has any more questions, happy to forward those to Casey. And thanks again so much for your time.
Absolutely. And just to say, if anyone has any questions, then just, feel free to reach out to me, either through email or my website or my Instagram even, which is like at Casey Koyczan Art, or my website, caseykoyczan.com. Always here to help.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Evan.
Casey.
And you've done.
Awesome. Masicho.
Thank you.